Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA Broadcast, Sam Wilson. Welcome to the show, folks. Glad to have you along today. We've got a great show lined up, all kinds of good information, a couple of bullet points. Let's get to it. We have yet another Florida man story. Florida is the state that just it is the gift that keeps on giving. I don't know what they do down there, but frankly, I'm kind of starting to like it. They kind of get down, man, and they do whatever it is they're going to do. We've got more subway attacks in New York, the city that is turning itself more and more into the movie Escape from New York every day. Cultured meat. Do you even know what that is? Cultured meat. It's facing more opposition. We're going to get into that later. For once, we encounter a properly prepared hiker. Looking forward to that one. We've also got some listener emails today. Some of you have finally started writing in. Don't forget, if you want to get your questions or comments on the show, info@gearconvoy.com. And finally, did masks really help during COVID? Now, a lot of controversy there, but we're going to just get to the facts as purported by several clinical studies. So let's get to it. We go first to Tampa, Florida. The headline alone is all you need to know. Florida man accused of setting fire to strip club and throwing urine-filled bottle at cop. I mean, okay, you know what? Let's just get to it. Tampa police said that the gunman fired his weapon multiple times inside the empty Pink Pony Showgirls strip club in Tampa at around 5 a.m. on Wednesday and intentionally set it on fire. Folks, you're in a bad spot if you're showing up with firearms and arson tools to a strip club at 5 a.m. in Tampa, Florida. Let's just get that established right off the bat. The story continues. Cops responded within minutes and apprehended the suspect as he was dragging brush into the burning structure, a Tampa police spokesperson said. Pictures from the scene showed smoke billowing out of the building. Officers say they retrieved a handgun from the suspect they name as Arvin. I can't even pronounce his last name. No disrespect. Allegedly, after he was taken into custody. Tampa police say that when he was in custody, he complained he was thirsty and was given a water bottle by officers. It is alleged he damaged a camera inside the police holding area, urinated in the empty bottle, and threw it at an officer. That is disgusting. Why would you? I mean, clearly this guy's got some stuff going on. I don't know if it's intoxication, some mental issues or whatever, but he urinated in an empty bottle and threw it at an officer. That is disgusting. That is also a felony in most places, by the way. He is now facing charges of arson with injury, shooting within a building, weapon possession during a felony, battery on an officer, and criminal mischief. He was taken to Orient Road Jail. Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, man, what a disgusting thing to do. Can you imagine just doing your job? I don't know how they divide their shifts up there, but at 5 o'clock a.m., I would imagine guys are either just winding down on, guys and gals, winding down on night shift or just getting started on day shift. I don't know how they have their shifts staggered there, but can you imagine you're in the last hour or two of your shift and all of a sudden you've got an arson to deal with, gunshots, and some guy throwing a water bottle filled with urine on you? Ugh. What a crappy way to end or begin your shift. Either way, there's no winning that one. Okay, we go next to Manhattan, a subway assault. Teens beat man bloody for $15 in cash at subway station. Manhattan detectives are investigating a brutal subway beating on a Wednesday morning in which a group of teens attacked and robbed a man for a pittance of cash. Nice word. Well played there, reporter. Law enforcement sources said the bloody assault occurred on the mezzanine of the Canal Street station in Chinatown at about 4:25 a.m. on March 12. Are you seeing a pattern, a theme here? A lot of these stories, they happen between 2 and 5 a.m. It's like your parents used to tell you, nothing good happens after midnight or after whatever hour it was they said. It's basically true. A lot of these stories happened during that time. So what happened? According to police, a group of 6 unidentified teens approached the victim, a 38-year-old man, and went on the attack, punching and kicking him about the body. Following the assault, authorities said the assailants forcibly removed $15 in cash and his debit card from his hand. Another news source reported that the suspects had also stolen marijuana from the victim, but police sources could not immediately confirm that detail. They then took off from the platform and were last seen entering a Q train at the Canal Street stop. Man, what a shame. Okay, officers from the 5th Precinct and NYPD Transit District 2 responded to the incident. EMS rushed the wounded man to Bellevue Hospital, where he was listed in stable condition. So imagine you're just sitting there waiting for your train at Canal Street. So what a shame, right? There's all kinds of good things they could have been doing there at Canal Street, maybe not that particular hour of the night or early morning, however you want to put it. I used to live in New York, and when I would, let's say I took a Saturday and just wanted to go to the city, okay? So if you're not from New York, if you lived in Brooklyn or Queens or wherever, Manhattan was referred to as the city. And you would take, depending on what you wanted to do, like let's say I was going to spend a Saturday, I would take the train in there. Canal Street was a great stop. So you're right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of Chinatown, all right? What was the name of the place that we used to go to? So at the time, I was professionally restoring antiques and other pieces of furniture. So I would get off of Canal Street and take a walk over to, there was this place called Blick's Art Supplies, Blick's, I don't know, whatever it was, Blick's, Blicks, Art Supplies type of store. It was, if it's the same one that was there then, it was huge. It was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 stories of just all kinds of really neat, unique art supplies, specific badger hair type brushes, all kinds of different colorants and dyes, and just all kinds of stuff that you could use in any artistic endeavor. And I love going to that place. And I like taking the train. I would get off, usually a couple stops before. I like to walk to places. In Chinatown, one of my favorite things to do was go to one of the Chinese places and get a cup of noodles. I had no idea what I was buying at the time, but it was a cup of noodles. It was in Chinatown. It was delicious. And it was like $2, $2.50 for this big old, almost a quart-sized cup of noodles and broth. Delicious. You would go in the stores, you would see the ducks and chickens and all this other different stuff hanging that was, had been slaughtered and was drying in the window or whatever. It was just a really neat experience. One time, in fact, it was the first year that I arrived in New York. I just happened to walk into Chinatown during Chinese New Year festival. It was really cool. Just the dancing, fireworks, all kind of stuff. I don't know exactly what the festival was exactly about. Obviously, it's a New Year festival, but it lasted for several days or a week or two. I can't remember. But they would have a really, really amazing parades. Very artistic, very acrobatic, really cool. Then after that, I would go and get a slice or two of pizza along the way to this place I used to go called Paragon Sports. Now, Paragon, I don't know what it's like today, but at the time it was very cool. One of the few places I've ever been that had a substantial collection of custom knives and high-end knives and stuff. Me being a knife maker, I wasn't back then, but I am now. It was of high interest to me. Very cool. So Paragon Sports is really neat. That was one of the first places that I saw several high-end knives that I'd only seen at knife shows before. My dad and me were both knife collectors, so that was really neat to be able to see a place in person. Ironically, all of those knives are probably illegal to carry in New York City now, or maybe they were then, I don't know. But yeah, really interesting. Anyway, before I get off too far off track, that was all if he'd gotten off at the Canal Street station and if these young gentlemen had just gone and seen the sights, all kinds of good things they could have done instead of beating this poor 38-year-old man to a pulp and taking his $15 and allegedly some marijuana. So far, no arrests have been made in the ongoing investigation, police said. Man, what a shame. Crime has always been a problem in New York, any big city. We're not trying to overly pick on any place, but man, the continuing saga of Escape from New York, the movie that has now become a reality in New York City, it shows no signs of slowing down. What an insane place. I can't even imagine living there and working there now. Man, that reminds me of, so there was six on one, according to this. We don't know exactly how many assailants there were. It says 6. There could have been a little more, a little less, whatever, depending on witness statements. I don't know if they pulled surveillance. They probably did. I mentioned a couple of episodes ago about whenever I was accosted by a guy not too long ago over his dog. It was a whole long thing. But anyways, this is the interesting thing that you've got to remember when you deal with something like a street fight. If you're a grown adult, you should be avoiding those types of confrontations at almost all costs. And aside from the economic and the legal ramifications, you never know what's going to happen in a street fight. And so, as just a quick refresher, some guy came running after me, screaming and yelling, threatening my life and my safety and so forth, because his dog jumped out of his truck and was attacking my dog, or trying to, at the end of its leash, tied in the bed of the truck. And so I did the first thing that you should, in my opinion, you should almost always do when feasible, is create distance. So I crossed the street and got away from the whole mess. This guy's yelling and screaming and everything else. So anyways, I was able to I disengaged and walked away because I have nothing to gain by getting in any type of altercation with somebody who appeared to be possibly under the influence to me by the way they were acting. Now, I finished walking my dog around the neighborhood, and when I came back on the way through, there were 2 people that I spoke with on the sidewalk. Both of them approached me, not vice versa, and told me separately that had that guy attacked me, they had been watching the whole thing, and they said had that guy attacked me, they were both going to jump in and get involved. Now, this was unsolicited by me. I didn't tell them or ask them or approach them. They came to me and told me this. And one of them told me he was just looking for a reason to hurt somebody that day. Right or wrong, that's what happened. So what is the point? You never, ever know what's going to happen in an altercation like that, especially on some place like the street. New York, well, it doesn't matter whether it's New York or Oregon, wherever. You never know who else is watching. Now, I saw a number of people watching this whole thing unfold, but they came to me and told me, both of them, that they were going to get involved. And one of them basically said, I forget his exact words, but he was in a very bad place and he was just looking to hurt somebody. So you avoid these altercations at all costs. It's something that we see in like action movies and stuff, especially if you grew up in the 80s, 90s. The good guy, somebody would kind of get in his face or whatever, and then he winds up beating up this group of bullies or whatever. Guys, that's fantasy. That's a movie. If you're a grown person, you've got something to lose. If you've been paying your bills, you have a place to live, and you have a job and all this, you have something to lose. Not just your health, but legally and other manners, you have things to lose. Why in the world would you want to get involved in street altercations with people that most likely or more than likely have nothing to lose? So get out of there. I just thought it was interesting. I don't know if I shared that or not a couple of weeks ago, that both of those guys approached me and told me that they were going to get involved and attack him, not me. They were going to assist me, was their words. Now, would they? Who knows? But that's what they said. And you never know where somebody else, what they're going through, what's going on in their life and where they're at mentally, or whether they're on some sort of substance that would alter their judgment. You never know. So get out of there. You don't get into no street fights. This ain't a movie. Okay, here we go. Now, next story. Another state bans lab-grown meat. We go to South Dakota. South Dakota has a new law that will prohibit the use of public tax dollars for researching or purchasing cultivated meats. The representative who sponsored and introduced the bill, HB 1118, if that's how they say it there, in South Dakota's House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, was signed into law by Governor Larry Roden and goes into effect July 1. Excuse me a moment. Okay. I had to wet my whistle, pardon me. South Dakota is one of a number of growing states where the legislatures have taken efforts to place restrictions on cultivated meat to protect their own animal agriculture interests. Other states to do so include Florida, Alabama, and Nebraska. Now, interesting part. What, you may ask, is cultured meat? Cultivated meat, aka cultured meat or lab-grown meat. I had looked this up. I'd heard of it, but I'd never really researched it because it was nothing at all that I was interested in. The pictures of it look disgusting. I don't know if those are just images that are put up to discourage people or to, give it a bad rap. I don't know. Maybe it looks very similar to actual meat at some point. I have no idea. All I know is the images that I saw, it looked disgusting. So, cultured meat, also known as lab-grown or cell-based meat, is a form of meat that is produced by cultivating animal cells in a controlled environment outside of a living animal, rather than traditional animal agriculture. How it's made. Scientists take a small sample of cells from a living animal, often muscle cells. These cells are then grown in a laboratory setting in a nutrient-rich environment called a bioreactor. I am not making this up. This sounds like something from The Fly with, the Jeff Goldblum movie. A bioreactor where they grow nutrient-rich meat cells or muscle cells. The cells multiply and differentiate into muscle and fat tissue, forming the meat product. Okay, that sounds disgusting to me. I have less than zero desire to even taste that. Hopefully I haven't already. You never know where this stuff is being put. It could be in some food already that we don't know of, but what on earth? Of course, if you do some research, like I've said before, at the MOA Broadcast here, we're not here to tell you what to think. Sometimes I will share opinions, but when it comes to the news, especially on the political side of things, we're just going to do what the news used to do in the years past, which is present the information. You draw your own conclusions on what you think. That being said, my personal opinion is this sounds disgusting to me. I have less than zero interest or desire in eating something like that, and I can't imagine what the long-term ramifications may or may not be for putting that stuff in your body. What is wrong with just eating regular animals the way we've been doing it for thousands of years? Because, things always get better when we completely ignore a naturally existing product like a cow or pork or chicken and start feeding people a version that is grown in a lab somewhere, cooked up literally in a lab. I can't even imagine. But there's got to be, there's got to be some interesting long-term. I don't know if we have truly long-term results on this yet, but this is what happens when man goes in there and starts messing around with things and says, you know what, we don't like the natural existing version of this that has been around with us for thousands of years or longer. We're going to go produce a version in a laboratory and then feed it to people, and I guess we'll see what happens. Just like butter and margarine, right? When margarine came out, it was supposed to be the greatest thing ever. And now we're learning all kinds of issues with the seed oils and the other things that are involved in the production of margarine. Have you ever tried to feed margarine to an animal? Every time I've ever tried it, they won't even touch the stuff. but my dog and cat both enjoy eating butter. Okay? So take that where you will, but that's my personal experience. They will not touch margarine or foods cooked in some of these oils, but butter they enjoy. Artificial sweeteners. We're not going to have time. I'm going to have to cut all kinds of stuff. We're already running over time on this episode, but let's not forget two other products. We're going to get into one of these here in a minute. Sliced cheese products. You all know what these are like when you go to the supermarket and there are these individually packaged in plastic pieces of cheese product. And then coffee creamers. Again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What is already existing naturally is almost always, or in many, many cases, better. Coffee creamers, the artificial coffee creamers, look at the ingredients list on these. There's all kinds of ingredients and chemicals you cannot pronounce. What I add to my coffee, you may not have tried that. I started doing this originally in about 2001, is adding butter to my coffee. You may think that sounds weird. I usually drink my coffee black. I don't always take sugar. If I'm going to take sugar in there, I like the sugar in the raw or the turbinado sugar. It's almost like a type of brown sugar. You should try it. It gives a very, very good flavor. I don't really like the flavor of white sugar in coffee, but the raw sugar and the turbinado sugar are both delicious. Okay. Usually, though, I don't add sugar. That's once in a blue moon. But on the first 2 cups of coffee each day, I'll typically add between a teaspoon and a tablespoon of grass-fed butter. You should try it sometime. There's all kind of different recipes and names for this type of coffee, but it's very simple. You just add between a teaspoon and a tablespoon of grass-fed butter. There's almost no ingredients. You're basically, it's milk. It's the fatty portion of the milk is what butter is. It gets churned up, okay, or the cream, however you want to put it. But there's no other stuff added. Whether you use salted or unsalted is up to you. But the grass-fed butter, it adds a creamy flavor to it. My personal experience is it feels like it slows down. I can't be sure, but it feels like it slows down the absorption of the caffeine and whatnot into your system because my stomach doesn't get... I typically drink about 1 liter of coffee each morning and then more throughout the day. I drink a lot of coffee. Whenever I add the butter to the first couple of cups, my stomach doesn't get upset the way it occasionally does if I just drink straight black coffee on an empty stomach. That being said, the fats and such are supposed to be good for your body for the absorption. Do some research. We don't have time in this episode to get deeply into it. We'll address it again another time. But give it a try. Okay, we have to take a break. When we come back, we've got some fan mail, the plastic sliced cheese, and COVID masks. So get ready. We're going to take a break. Don't forget, you want to get your questions or comments on the show, info@gearconvoy.com. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA Broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? And we are back from the break. We've got all kinds of good information and a limited amount of time to share it. We've got fan mail or jump in to the plastic sliced cheese. Let's do the fan mail. We haven't done that yet. Let's do that. Here we go. Excuse me. We have 2 we're going to cover today. These were both sent in via email at the info@gearconvoy.com email address. So we don't have a physical address and we're not going to name and shame anyone other than first names. for the emails. The first one comes to us from Douglas. All right, Douglas, what have you to say? We share the good and the bad here at the MOA Broadcast. Hello, I found your knives online and don't understand why you make so many knives with hollow handles. This is true. I make primarily hollow handle survival knives. We'll get to that in a minute. They will never be as strong as a full tang knife and will probably fail you when you need it the most. Even light batoning. Excuse me. For those of you that are not into the bushcraft scene in the outdoor survival knife market, batoning is when you take a knife and you stick it into like a piece of wood and you take another piece of wood and you hammer on the spine of the knife to split wood with it. There are arguments ad infinitum on bushcraft and knife forums about the efficacy of this particular technique. We won't get into that today. We're just going to stick with the email. Even light batoning will probably knock that thing apart. Also, what's up with the bleep bleep? These are unfriendly to radio terms, Hawaiian shirts you wear. So for those of you that don't watch the video version of the podcast or the radio broadcast, this show gets broadcast on the radio Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and Sunday evening at 8 p.m. on the local Southern Oregon radio waves. Then it gets uploaded to become a podcast or a video podcast if you go to our Patreon page and become a member there, and you can watch the video version as well. I wear Hawaiian or Aloha shirts, as they're called. It's something I like to do. It to me, it's a personal expression. It puts me in the right mood, so to speak. If you ever go to knife shows or trade shows, you'll see me with a cowboy hat and Hawaiian shirts, and that's just my thing. So we'll get to that in a minute. So to address your questions, Douglas, I make knives with hollow handles because I'm a believer in the concept. There have been some issues with this concept in the past, but this was primarily due to poor design execution. We'll get to that in the next email. But everybody and their brother right now in the knife world makes full tang bushcraft knives. For those of you that don't follow the knife world, a full tang knife simply means where the steel goes through the handle. You can see steel all the way around the handle. It's just two handle slabs that are attached to the knife, but you can see steel all the way around. Everybody makes those. There is an endless variety of what's called full tang knives. I do something different that very, very few people do, and in my opinion, I do it very well. I make hollow-handled survival knives. That may not be your thing. That's okay. You don't have to buy one. You don't have to like the concept. But there is a strong, even if it may be not the largest, it is a strong and healthy following of people that like hollow-handled survival knives. This allows you to put a survival kit or gear, or whether it's medication, money, whatever, fire starting materials in the waterproof handle compartment of a knife. You saw these very, very popular in the 80s, and they started to kind of wane from there because they got, a lot of them were made, at flea market style junk and so forth. Another topic for another day. But that's why I do it. I've got videos on our YouTube channel at Gear Convoy on YouTube. If you look up Sam Wilson or Wilson Custom Knives, where I am viciously beating on these knives with an axe handle, a club. I'm doing chin-ups off of them. The knives aren't going to fail in anything approaching sane use. So, that being said, buy what you want. Folks, that's the beauty of our market. We are so saturated. We have so many options now that it's unbelievable. Buy what makes you happy. That's the point of it all. As far as the Hawaiian shirts, Douglas with a lowercase d, or should we say Douglas with a small d. I don't spend my time in the basement where you probably do, eating Hot Pockets and Tostino's pizza rolls and have so many red sauce stains on your shirts, it just looks like a Hawaiian shirt. These are actual Hawaiian Aloha shirts designed to look that way because I like it. If you don't like it, that's entirely fine, sir. But I've never really encountered another man that began his issue with, another man's appearance or the way he dressed himself. So you do you. I've got good news and bad news. Don't contact me again. I wish you the best. We move on to Jerry. Jerry says, hello, I found your podcast while on your website looking at your knife. This will be gearconvoy.com, I'm assuming. I must admit, after the experiences many of us had in the 80s with the cheap and poorly made hollow-handled survival knives from overseas, I wasn't overly interested in the concept. Yours do seem very well made, though, so I will at least do some more research. One of the things I noticed was that none of the knives on your website are serrated. What are your thoughts on serrations, and why don't any of your knives have them? As this feature seems like it would lend itself well to an emergency. Thank you for your time, and I enjoy the podcast. Sincerely, Jerry. Jerry, you make a couple of good points there. Number one, many of the hollow-handled survival knives that were made and sold both at box stores and flea markets and so forth, catalogs, in the 80s were junk. They were made overseas. They were made very expediently, very quickly, very cheaply to capitalize on the Rambo knife trend that was popular at the time. Our knives here at Techline Knives and GearConvoy.com, all of the components, everything is done and made here in the U.S. domestically. That is not a cheap way to do things, but our quality control, in my opinion, is second to none. These are very, very close to custom handmade knives. So I'm not really worried about the quality aspect. Again, if you look at the videos we have on our website and our YouTube channel, we have just vicious abuse testing these knives, and they hold up very, very well. So that's not a concern. The serrations is an excellent question. I agree with you. I think serrations are a great idea. For those of you that don't know, serrations on knives are those little scalloped edges you see typically like kind of on a bread knife. Serrations do a couple of things, and I'm going to run out of time. We have so much ahead of us here. But serrations, they give you little points, almost like a saw. So even when the knife becomes dull, you can continue to saw through things. And by those those raised curved edges, you're effectively lengthening the edge of the knife. Why don't I have knives that have serrations? The answer is very simple. Whether I agree with it or not, most people either have issues sharpening serrations, or they are afraid of them, or don't understand them, or don't want them. The bottom line is the unserrated or non-serrated knives outsell serrated knives with my fan base or customer base on a high level. Many, many more non-serrated knives, so I don't offer the serrations. I do have saw teeth on some of the knives, but that's on the custom side, different stories. So excellent questions, Jerry. Glad you wrote in. Thank you very much, and we appreciate the support. Remember, if you want to write in, info@gearconvoy.com, and if you go to the Gear Convoy website, you can find all kinds of information, including about the MOA broadcast and the video versions and so forth. Now, we are ready to move on to, let's see, where to go. Okay, before the break, we talked about a few things, adding butter to coffee. Folks, do some research. I love doing this. I don't usually do it when I'm in public because people either A, don't understand, or B, they just think it's weird and they stare or make comments. At home, though, I typically start my first at least 2 cups of coffee a day with a teaspoon to a tablespoon of grass-fed butter, not margarine, grass-fed butter in my coffee. You should try it. It's a lot better than the synthetic or artificial coffee creamers and all of the chemicals and sweeteners that they have in them. But we're moving on. The next step is the sliced cheese products, okay? We go to Science Geek. The Science Geek observed, this is some website, I don't know what this guy, if that's his title or that's the name of the article, observed that cheese that comes in plastic wrapping under microscope reveals alarming amount of microplastics. Okay, sorry, I need a sip. The Australia-based creator took cheese slices wrapped in plastic. We all know what these are. In America, when you're at the supermarket, you see these as the individually packaged in plastic cheese-type products that you would use to put, I'm not going to mention name brands, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but these are the individually packaged cheese slice products. There's a reason they're often referred to as cheese products instead of cheese. Again, do your own research. I don't want to tell you what to think. We just like to share information and you draw your own conclusions. The Australian-based creator took cheese slices wrapped in plastic, as is done by commercial packaging, that was said to have been sitting in his fridge for years. So I guess he's doing an experiment. He pulls some slices out that have been sitting in his fridge for a while, years allegedly, and we go from here. He quickly peeled out the thin layer of plastic wrap from the cheese, or rather, quote-unquote, plastic cheese, their words, and added small chunks of it into a preparation slide for a microscope. He's going to examine the cheese. Okay, I know why they call this plastic cheese, as in I'm pretty sure we have found microplastics in this cheese, he explained. Displaying the shocking observation, he revealed the cheese bits were covered in microplastics throughout. The cheese does not even need to be plastic wrapped because it's full of microplastic, he said. The microscopic view showcased tiny, irregular bits of microplastic spread out on the cheese chunk. Some pieces were elongated and thread-like in shape, while some others appeared like small blobs of plastic. A few even displayed the distinct plastic blue, even at a microscopic level, which further confirms that plastic has managed to penetrate. He speculated whether the cheese even spoiled after being in his fridge for a long time. His words, "This is a heavily processed item, and so it's not surprising to find microplastics in it," he added. Now think about that. The next time you use a pre-sliced cheese product. And what do we know about this cheese product? It doesn't even melt half the time. Have you ever seen somebody make a sandwich or a grilled cheese or put this on a burger? If you do an internet search on this, there are all kinds of videos and images, and I have done this myself in real life. You probably have too. This stuff doesn't even melt the way regular cheese does. Why on earth would you want that in your body? Now, what you do is up to you. Again, we're not here to tell you what to do. If anything, we want to stimulate thinking. Why would you want to do that? Okay, on to our next story. Now, this is the COVID story. Folks, if you remember not that many years ago, masks and COVID-19 and all this was the rage. Every story, every day. We saw videos online. We saw news reports of people being dragged out of stores, arrested for not wearing quote-unquote masks properly or the proper type or at all. Again, let me be clear. We are politically neutral. We are not going to get involved in politics. We're not going to tell you what to think. We're just going to give you the info. You draw your own conclusions. But it's undeniable that many people, I remember myself going through stores. I had a mustache at the time. I didn't have my beard, but I had a mustache. If you have a mustache and you're wearing these masks, the mustache naturally pulls the mask down. I remember in one instance, I was literally chased around a grocery store by this little old lady who couldn't have weighed more than 110 pounds at probably 5'2", who was darn near ready to get physical with me because my mustache kept pulling the top of my mask just below the ridge or brim of my nose. It was intense. Okay, we go to Emerging Pathogens Institute, University of Florida. The story was published on May 28th, 2024. So well after the height of the pandemic craze. Now, we're not going to have time to go through all of this. We're going to have to cherry pick, to use that term, some points, and we're going to share them with you. All we want to do, you take this in, stimulate some thinking, and see what you think. First up, confusion about the 6-foot rule. Even after catching on to the dangers of airborne transmission, the world was still paying attention to the wrong thing. The 6-foot rule was created with the idea that big droplets carrying the virus would fall to the ground before they could reach other people. But these were never the biggest threat. The real danger came from fine aerosol particles, which stay airborne long after the person who expelled them has left the room. The 6-foot rule, this refers to the quote-unquote social distancing. There are a lot of studies that have gone back and forth about this. We'll leave that for another time. We're going to move forward. The 6-foot rule, social distancing, helped to slightly reduce the risk of transmission in large spaces. In smaller spaces, though, an entire room could quickly fill with aerosol particles. People might still be safe if the space had frequent air turnover, but older buildings without proper ventilation could be especially dangerous. My interpretation of what they're saying is if you're in a well-ventilated modern building that had good air movement and handling, this might help. If you're in a smaller, older building, this essentially meant very little, is what they're saying. More people started wearing masks once they realized COVID-19 was primarily transmitted through the air. But many masks didn't effectively filter out tiny aerosol particles because they weren't woven finely enough. In the case of cloth masks, think of people that were wearing bandanas pulled up over their faces, bandanas that are so loosely woven that you can see light through them, and in some cases almost read print through the mask, versus a microscopic virus that's airborne. Again, draw your own conclusions. Or because they gaped at the sides in the case of common surgical masks. These are the surgical masks that you saw people put on that you could literally slide your hand into on the side of their face, on their cheeks. Are they really stopping microscopic particles of a virus when you can slide your hand through the mask and the seal on your face, especially if you have a beard or large facial hair? It's not forming a seal. Now, they added that N95 masks, which form a tight seal around the nose and mouth. I would argue that because I have used literally in various trades I've worked in over the years, hundreds upon hundreds. For years, there were jobs where I would wear a brand new N95 mask a day while doing my job. I've used a lot of N95 masks. They do not form an airtight seal, as it says here, around the nose and mouth at any time. In fact, if you take that N95 mask off at the end of the day and look in the mirror, typically at the bottom of your chin and around your nose, you can see where dust particles that are large enough to see in the air, have collected around your nose and your chin where you've drawn them in. At that point in time, I didn't even have a beard. If you're wearing a beard, these masks are going to do even less. Again, I'm not saying they're worthless. Draw your own conclusions. But the N95 mask, especially for people that have facial hair, they do not form. To form a seal, you have to have a respirator. Respirators are made of silicone or similar materials. They actually lock on, they seal to your face, and they form the seal all the way around your breathing areas. N95 masks, for the most part, do not do that. But anyway, we move on. Let's not forget, okay, let's see, what did he say? The N95 masks, which form a tight seal around the nose and mouth, were the safest. I won't argue they were safer than many others, but they're not locking it out like a cartridge or an air-fed respirator. And let's not even get into the people that were wearing safety glasses and a plastic face shield. Remember those people? We'd see them walking around. They had safety glasses like you wear in a wood shop, and one of those big, large face shields that's just over their face. What is that filtering out? Again, draw your own conclusions. Now, we go to our next study. This is the headline, then I'll get into the story. Wearing face masks did not reduce risk of COVID infection after first Omicron wave, research shows. Again, Thursday, the 16th of May, 2024. This was not done during the height of the pandemic, but after, when a lot of research started to kind of focus and the hysteria settled down. Let me get a sip here. Okay. let's get into this one. We're going to have to trim some of this because we're running out of time rapidly. I appreciate your attention. New research from the University of East Anglia has found that wearing face masks did not lower the risk of COVID infection following the initial surge of the Omicron variant. The analysis of official data found that several risk factors for infection altered significantly as the dominant variant in the UK changed from Delta to Omicron in December 2021. What they're saying is as the different variants changed, basically the effectiveness of certain strategies changed as well. Our research shows that there were changes in some risk factors around the time that the Omicron variant became dominant. The co-author of the study said this isn't totally surprising because laboratory evidence suggests that the Omicron variant was better able to infect the cells lining the upper respiratory tract than previous variants and so was more transmissible. Now, I don't have time. This was a long study. I can't condense it into a broadcast to get all this information. So we've got a couple of bullet points that I found most interesting. Excuse me. Again, we're cherry picking some of these so you can look at the study yourself and draw your own conclusions. The study found that changes to risk factors included in November 2021. Always wearing face masks at work, school, or enclosed spaces was associated with reduced risk of being infected in both adults and children. But after the first Omicron wave, it was not. Okay, so at one point masks are making a big difference, and then all of a sudden they're not. Interesting. Early overseas travel was not associated with increased risk, but later on it was. So I don't know if COVID or Omicron had their visa revoked or what, but apparently later on, overseas travel was associated with increased risk. Interesting. Next point. Being of ethnic minority was strongly associated with increased risk in the first few months of the UK epidemic, but was associated with lower risk and no significant trend change during the study's full monitoring period. So, again, I'm not a scientist and I don't have all of the data. These are just the bullet points they gave us. But according to this, it seems to me, what I draw from this is, in the beginning, COVID was racist against ethnic minorities, and then it became enlightened and was no longer racist against ethnic minorities. Interesting. Okay, the researchers said the balance of evidence is that wearing face coverings reduces transmission of respiratory infections in community settings and did reduce transmission of COVID-19. That was their conclusion. Okay. The question, however, is by how much? I'll just be blunt. After reading a number of these research papers and so forth, that was not my question. But again, we're here to report the facts. You draw your own conclusion. All right, we're going to wrap it up. We move to Florida. We go to Florida. Once again, Babson Park, Florida. A 911 call is shedding light on what happened when an alligator attacked a woman who was kayaking with a group of 30 people on Monday in a canal near the Polk Osceola County line. This is Florida, man. There's a group of 30 people kayaking and a woman is attacked by an alligator. Let's get to it. Around 1 p.m., a man called 911 and reported that 2 people had been bitten by an alligator while the group was kayaking on a canal. The caller explained the group launched their kayaks at Lake Kissimmee State Park, and they were on their way back to Lake Kissimmee when the attack happened. He later said only one woman had been bitten by the gator and that the reptile had taken a life jacket. So this alligator comes up, bites this woman in a kayak. It appears he drug her out of the kayak because later in the story she's referred to as being in the water, and then he took some guy's life jacket. These gators almost have as much of a bad attitude as the kangaroos do down in Australia. The operator told him to help was on the way, and to clean the wound, get a cloth on it, yada, yada, yada. They found a first aid kit in the boat, but nobody wanted to go into the water to get it because they were scared of the gator. I don't blame them. I would be scared too, frankly. He said the gator was still in the middle of the channel messing around with the life. So this gator, I guess, is thrashing around with his life vest. They couldn't see the gator, but they saw the life vest moving around, so they thought the reptile was in the water underneath the vest. A little more than 30 minutes into the call, the caller said he could see and hear a helicopter circling overhead. A kayaker waved a paddle to signal in the helicopter. The helicopter landed, got on an airboat, and reached the kayakers about 45 minutes after 911 was called. That's not a bad response, really, when you think about where they're at in the middle of nowhere, potentially. I think that particular area is about an hour or so east of Tampa in Central Florida. The woman was taken to an area hospital with an injury to her elbow. It is unclear what condition she is in. Now, it mentions the help on the rescue people on the helicopter took an airboat. Briefly, years ago, I took an airboat ride in the Everglades of Florida. As we got deeper and deeper into the swamps, or whatever they call it there, we kept hitting these logs in the airboat. Airboats are really cool. It was a neat experience. If you ever get the chance, go for it. But we kept hitting these logs in this airboat, and when we stopped for a break and they turned the engine down, it was very loud. I remember asking the operator, "What are these logs that we keep hitting?" And he said, "They're not logs, they're alligators." So if our airboat died, we're literally in alligator-infested waters. It was wild. That's Florida, folks, for you. All right, remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you do, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.